You're the instigator. You're the one who got this whole D&D YouTubers Learn Pathfinder 2E thing going.
So a lot of you probably know me from Ronald the Rules Lair's Pathfinder game with Treantmonk, D4 Deep Dives, DM Lair, etc. And if you don't know me from that, well, I play in a Pathfinder game with some D&D YouTubers. It's pretty cool. You should check it out. Unfortunately, I have to go on a hiatus for that game. After I dropped my video last week, Ronald called me a huge loser, gave me a swirly, and told me to come back when I leveled up my toxic masculinity. I'm just kidding. My work schedule gets pretty hectic this time of year, and so I just didn't have time for it. Anyway, I wanted to give you guys a little behind the scenes look into that game, how it formed, and what it was like to play with some absolute titans in the D&D YouTuber space. Which I have a funny story about that for later. First, let's take it from the beginning. A year and a half ago, I dropped a video called What's the Real Difference Between Pathfinder 2E and D&D 5E? The video quality was mediocre and I wasn't really expecting anyone to watch it. But like a day later, this guy called Ronald commented, "This is really great," and subscribed to my YouTube channel, which, you know, you can too. Anyway, I'll spare you the theatrics. We all know that Ronald guy was the rules lawyer. We started commenting back and forth on each other's videos, and after like 4 months, I finally hit him up and I was like, "Hey, we should collab on something." And then Ronald was like, "Great, what should we collab on?" And I was like,
I don't know. I never thought I'd get this far.
we ended up sort of figuring our shit out, and what resulted was a 30-minute directionless video that was pretty much me just pitching Dungeon World and Masks to him and Dumble, aka Philzo. Then we had a 4 or 5 session long Dungeon World campaign with Sean, aka Joel Ved, which I ended prematurely because I have the life resiliency of a toddler. Obviously, each one of those elements has more to it, but you're not really here for those stories, are you? What does matter is that a year ago, I promised Ronald that I would play in one of his Pathfinder 2 games. But between my day job, my night job, and my YouTube channel, I just didn't have time for it. But then one day in September, after getting backed up on work yet again, my boss looked me in the eye and he said, "Austin, do you really want to work here?" So I put my chin up, puffed my chest out, shoulders back, looked him right in the eyeballs, and I said, "Let me think about it." The next day, I put in my 2 weeks. This meant that come October, I would have time. So I reached out to Ronaldinho and I was like, "Hey man, I finally have time. I would love to play in one of your Pathfinder games." And he was like, "Dope, let's round up the Rapscallions." The Rapscallions, of course, being Sean and Dom. But Ronald wanted to have one more player.
Dominic and I were already Pathfinder 2E players and GMs. And I really wanted my buddy to see what the game was like. So I wanted, the generic, we have 4 players. And also it helps to, in case somebody can't make it.
Ronald entertained the idea of inviting Treantmonk to play with us.
I also said, "Oh, Treantmonk, and he won't give me the time of day, and he won't even read my messages, and you told me do it." And then I did it.
Turns out Treantmonk, aka Chris, was totally down to try Pathfinder and he agreed to play with us, which kind of changed things.
And then I thought, hey, this could be a thing. We can get some more D&D YouTubers on board. At least one more.
I threw out Matt Colville's name, but that felt unrealistic. However, Dom became adamant that D4 Deep Dives would be the perfect 5th player for our game. Just like Chris, he was also a D&D optimization channel, and him and Chris had actually played in a campaign before. So Ron asked Chris to ask D4, aka Colby, if he wanted to join our game, and as we all know, Colby said yes and joined our game. Now you might be thinking this is when the campaign begins, right?
Wrong.
Because there was still one more person that needed to be added to our core group of players.
Yeah, I reached out to Luke, the DM Lair, because he was putting out videos at the time that were really he was sick and tired of watching.
He just couldn't make it for the first couple of sessions. Anyway, let's fast forward a couple weeks to the 0 session. It was kind of awkward, but not awkward in a...
Hi, Kevin.
But awkward in have you ever been to a party or a wedding or something where there's 2 distinct groups of people and they only know each other through the host, and then the host leaves and then they have to interact with each other? That kind of awkward. Chris and Kobe talk to each other, and Ronald, and Dom, Sean, and I talk to each other, and Ronald. We didn't really cross that line very much in the zero session. To be fair, that is pretty typical for a zero session where not everybody knows each other. Anyway, we scheduled the first session for about a week later, and let me tell you, I actually had a lot of anxiety going into it. And it wasn't any sort of starstruck anxiety that you might be expecting. I had actually never heard of Treantmonk or D4 prior to this Pathfinder game. By the way, the reason why I was feeling anxious is I kept thinking, like, what the fuck am I doing here? Like, this was gonna be turned into a YouTube series about basically D&D YouTubers learning Pathfinder. Nobody who was clicking on the video was gonna give a shit about me or Sean or Dom or even Ronald. People only wanted to watch this video to see Chris and Colby's reactions, and the rest of us were just NPCs. And as you may have heard before, when you're playing an RPG for content rather than for fun, it shifts the dynamic a little bit. You want to be entertaining for the audience, and you start thinking about things like it's a TV show rather than a game. Or at least I do. So with the knowledge that this was being made for content and that nobody was really clicking on it for me, I didn't know what to do with myself. As I'm sure y'all know, I have a little bit of an energetic, larger-than-life persona, especially when I'm in a performatory environment. Now, this may come as a shock, but in my experience, this persona can annoy people, especially when they're not actually watching the video for you. But then I thought, if I just stay quiet and only speak when spoken to, then like, why am I even there? The great thing about overthinking is that it goes away when you have to take action. And the game started, so I had to take action. And it turns out Chris and Colby are like super freaking chill. And Dom and Sean clearly didn't have any issues about the fuck. And Dom and Sean didn't seem to be bothered by the clout disparity at all, so it made it a lot easier for me to just be myself. By the second session, I was straight chillin', and I didn't really think of the series as like marquee content, but a game of Pathfinder being played by new and old friends. Even when the DM Lair finally joined us, I didn't feel anxious in the slightest, which is kind of surprising because he is the one guy that I had heard of before, and I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit starstruck that first session because like I learned how to DM from him. It was crazy. That's pretty much the juicy behind the scene details of how the game came together, but you might be wondering what my takeaways from it are. Well, first, let me say, I feel like there's this weird divide in the RPG community between like narrative nerds and opto jocks. As a narrative nerd, I stood on my pedestal, ignoring extracting every single number I could out of the rules and my character sheet in favor of creating a character that told an interesting story and made for an interesting narrative. And I felt like opto jocks can't RP. That's why they min-max, because they don't know how to roleplay or come up with interesting, fun narratives. And this group was made entirely of optimizers, and they were all fantastic role players. I'm pretty sure they were better than me at role playing. So now my flawed worldview has been turned upside down and I don't know what to believe anymore. In terms of the system itself, I've always said that Pathfinder is my go-to system if I want a gamier tabletop role-playing experience. Now, I've always said that, having only run like 3 Pathfinder sessions, which I feel like I ran like shit because I didn't fully understand the system. In other words, that take came from my very basic understanding of Pathfinder, not any practical experience playing it. But now that I've played 4 sessions run by someone who actually knows what he's doing, I can safely say that if I want a gamier RPG experience, I'm playing Pathfinder. The huge choice of character building options makes the game super freaking fun, and it's really hard to fuck yourself with a bad build. Ironically, I did sort of fuck myself with a bad build. It wasn't necessarily that the build was bad, it was just built towards doing stuff that I wasn't trying to do. Anyway, the 3-action economy is great. It makes a ton of sense, and while it is gamey, you're playing Pathfinder 2e for the gamey experience. Speaking of gaminess, there's one more thing that I really liked about this game, and this might be controversial to my fellow narrative nerds, but being able to do an action without having to justify it in the fiction is so nice sometimes. There were a number of times where I wanted to do an action and then I stopped myself and I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense within the fiction. And then I'm like, wait a minute, it doesn't have to make sense. This is Pathfinder. It's on my character sheet. That means I can do it. Finally, Ronald is a freaking great DM. then I know he's my friend and you're supposed to say that your friend is a great DM even if they totally suck, but like genuinely, he is phenomenal at teaching Pathfinder 2e. Not only does he know the system like the back of his hand, but he genuinely knows how to be a good dungeon master in general and run a fun game. So if you ever have the opportunity to learn the system from him, you should absolutely take it. That's all from me though. If you made it this far, then you should 100,000% click right here and take a look at whatever it is that the YouTube algorithm says that you'll probably enjoy from my channel. And thank you so much for watching.